وقل رب زدني علما.
So now we get to what is not poetry. So Al-Unnabi carries on, he says, فَإِنْ عَرِيَ عَنْ ذَلِكَ أَوْ بَعْضِهِ فَلَيْسَ بِشِعْرٍ وَلَا يُسَمَّى قَائِلُهُ شَاعِرًا. So if something doesn't have these poetic meters that we've mentioned here, it's not قول مفيد, it's not فائدة تامة, it's not معرب, it's not موزون on a particular meter, it doesn't have قافية, etc., and it's not been intended as poetry, then it won't be poetry, at least in Arabic. And in English, of course, it's the same thing. Any piece of literature is not in rhyming verse, so it's not in meter, it doesn't have beats to it, it doesn't have a flow to it, it doesn't have a rhythm to it, and it doesn't rhyme according to the proper rhyming scales that we have in English, then it wouldn't be poetry. It might be something else, it might be prose. So this is not actually a criticism, this is just calling a spade, putting everything within its correct categories. So it's nothing to be offended by. You'll see a lot of so-called poets on Instagram or Tumblr or Twitter or somewhere, and then they have these fancy little squares with strange sentences organized in a really weird way, and calling themselves poets. You don't become a poet that quickly. You can become a poet quickly, but you can't just make it cheap. It's not a cheap art. There is it's a very rich tradition, actually. So, for example, I've given a couple of examples here about why somebody shouldn't be offended about this. It's just a matter of definitions. So let's say football. Football is a very famous sport. So everybody knows that football is a specific sport with its own rules, with a specific type of pitch, with a specific types of nets, 2 teams, 11 people. You'll have a spherical football, and you run around, you dribble the ball with your feet. Otherwise, it's just not going to be football. Now, if a group of people decide, okay, no, we're going to change the size of the ball or the shape of the ball, we're not going to run around it with our feet. We're going to have the ball in our hands, and we're going to run with that. Yes, okay, fair enough. You have every right to do that, but just realize you've gone beyond the boundaries of football now. Call that a different sport. And this is exactly what happened. This is how rugby came about.